Good evening, everyone. My name is Paul. I'm just going to walk you through government policy on cap and trade in Ontario, but I'm going to emphasize a couple pieces to it. I'm going to look at the price of gasoline. I'm going to look at an oil perspective of how pricing is set, and then I'm going to get into specific issues with around climate change and cap and trade. So basically, if we look at here, I took this from the Government of Canada, Stats Canada site, so you can kind of see how much it costs for a liter of gas in Canada across the country. Now, remember this, a lot of this has distribution or basically logistics cost into it, so that's why you might see prices vary from province to province and location to location. Plus you got taxation changes too. So you look at, for example, with Ontario, and look at Toronto, where Toronto's showing you about 95.7 cents on average a liter in January. If you look compared to some of the lowest ones like Ottawa, that are 86.9. So a lot of that can be driven by local factors. A lot of it's also how close are you to the refinery. So you need to bear that in mind in terms of setting the overall price. Here's what I wanted you to focus on here. This kind of shows you the breakup in terms of gasoline prices. About 55% of the gas cost is in crude oil costs. So we've seen a reduction in barrel costs, which would make sense down the road that you should see a little bit of a drop in price. But then remember, it's a combination of two things. As the currency value of the dollar too also will impact as well. So that comes into play. And then you're looking at GST, municipal taxes. That's about 25 to 35%. Then it's looking at difference between refiner margins and also local margins. So that kind of gives you an idea of the overall pricing of gasoline. This just gives you a little bit more why it gives you an explanation why strong profits and what's the break at the pump. It also talks to you about pump prices. It shows you the difference between a wholesale and refiner's margin. It also talks about varied position by region, as well as what's going on with the competition. So I kind of wanted to give you an idea of perspective why Shell sets the price the kind of the way gasoline is set. And same thing with some a little bit more fuel pricing here. Now I want to talk a few minutes here on this. Now there's been a lot of talk about doom and gloom when you hear about climate change. It's been going on for close to 2 decades. Now, are there issues with the climate? Yes. Does the earth naturally warm up? Yes. What you need to keep into play is there's a lot of political games going on there, gamemanship, to kind of promote a pro-green agenda. You need to back away from that and take a holistic view of what's really driving here. Okay. In most cases, if you're talking about GHG, Canada is a low polluter in terms of GHG. There's other polluters in the world that are much more worse off than Canada is. The second point is there's been people like former Greenpeace that come up and spoken out about climate change, and you should go watch some of these videos to get what the right side is saying about climate change, to bear that in mind. The other point too that I want to bring up here as well is cap and trade itself has been around for a while. It's also been fraught with fraud. It's never really kind of worked in terms of thing. It's been a cash cow, and all it's done is really push up the cost of consumer goods and the cost of overall production, and to everything else that goes across what you buy. That's not really something that people talk about. They may talk about the BC plan as being working, but the BC plan's added about 5 to 6% the cost of to everybody in BC in terms of their everyday life. That reduces what you spend on goods, and it's consumer spending that drives the economy. These are some more links about BC. Just talks a little bit more, some videos I put together and other people put together around GHG. I would encourage you to watch some of these videos so they get more of a perspective. Let's talk about the cap and trade. The Ontario government's on a big push. It's not so bad that they haven't taxed us to death on everything else. They decided now that we should pay about 4.3 cents more a liter to go into a fund to support green energy technology. Basically, it's a cash grab. And all that's really going to do is force up the cost of goods by 2 to 4% on everything you do, because everything else in this world relies on gasoline to distribute that product. Therefore, that cost needs to be passed on to the consumer. The only analysis is these people are trying to tell you that the cost of gasoline will only add a small amount to a personal budget. That's not really a true statement. It's not. It's going to add a lot more than that. If you look at household spending on the goods and services you buy, and say food's a good portion of that, you're going to see a 2.5 to 4% increase in your food costs. That means less money you're going to be able to spend on other things. And as I said earlier in this presentation, it's consumer spending that's going to drive the economy. It doesn't seem to be really a big concern to win. I'm not sure why she doesn't take a look at this other than it's a cash grab. But then again, you're dealing with a socialistic government that believes the private sector and the citizens of Ontario are just rich people that she can tax to death or almost treat them as her own little personal debit machine. So you need to bear in mind that some of these policy changes aren't really going to work. Ontario is struggling enough to attract businesses. Adding a carbon tax isn't really going to help make Ontario more competitive. It's actually not even going to do much good in reducing greenhouse gases. So you need to bear that in mind when you're starting to listen to the pro agenda on this stuff, because really it's fraught with not clear statements. It's more of the agenda that's easy to get government money if you're really pushing a green agenda versus trying to look at other aspects of cleaning up things. I wanted to kind of lay this out to people so they could kind of get a good understanding of cap and trade, but also understand how really taxation policies that come into Ontario really aren't going to do anything. Thank you.